What I want to talk to you about today is, isn't it time for change? I've been in the casino business since 1972, and we've gone through a lot of changes already, but I've really never seen a time that's quite like the time that we're in. And let me give you some background about why, and see if you agree. From 1980 to 2008, maybe 2007, we had one of the fastest growing industries in the country, maybe even in the world. I guess gaming was growing all through the world. We had a diminishment in the moral opposition to gaming. We had public officials, tribal officials, that realized that they could essentially allow gaming and tax it or take it for the tribal purposes and have a significant stream of revenue. And it's always amazing how streams of revenue change moral opposition. We've seen that gaming, when I started in 1972, was legal only in Nevada, to New Jersey in 1977, to the riverboats in the early 80s, and on to where we are now. And Las Vegas was probably the epicenter of gaming for a long, long time. I don't think it is anymore, but it certainly was. And if we look at Las Vegas, we can see that all they had to do was build more casinos and people would pour in. And that was true around the country. I don't know if you guys remember when Casino Magic opened up in Tunica, Mississippi, and they got to charge $10 admission fee just to walk into the casino. Those were good days. But times have changed. Going back to Las Vegas, used to be built and they'll come. Now we're all wondering when they're coming. We have the Fontainebleau, which is a $2 billion project that was, well, actually it was going to be a $3 billion. They got $2 billion into it and stopped. It's on the north end of the Strip. Last I heard, they've spent $2 billion on this place, and the highest and best use they can find for it right now is to maybe scrap it out and sell the steel. We got City Center that was built for in the range of $5.5 to $6 billion. That's worth about $2 billion now. At least it's open. We've got Echelon, which was the Boyd Group's property that sits right in the middle of the Strip as a skeleton of what it was supposed to be. It was also supposed to be a $6 billion project. Yesterday, the Sahara Hotel closed after 53 years in business, and things are changing. So what happened? Well, in 30 years, our supply of gaming machines, places that you could go to gamble, has increased over 1,000%. Back in the early 80s, basic economics said that the supply of gaming machines was less than the pent-up demand to gamble. We had these laws that prevented people from gambling, and there were a lot of people that wanted to, and every time we opened up a casino, we got to take some of that pent-up demand. We continued to add to the supply and add to the supply and do very little to add to the demand. What we find is that for the most part, our casino marketing campaigns are aimed not at attracting new players or brand new or asking new consumers to start gambling, but rather to identify and steal the best players from other casinos. And that does make some sense, because it is far cheaper to go out and grab somebody else's known customer than it is to create a new one. But at some point, there's so much supply and so much competition for those customers that the comps and the costs that we incur in trying to attract those people make it so that it doesn't pencil out anymore. And hence we now have an imbalance of supply and demand, where 20 years ago the imbalance was on the demand was bigger than the supply. Now the supply is bigger than the demand. And our problems are rooted in that issue. Let me read you a letter that I got from one of the Native American casinos in California late last year. Put up an excerpt here. It says, "Dear John, our best customer just died. She was elderly and a wonderful lady. She was also responsible for almost 3% of our gambling revenue. If we don't find a replacement for that revenue, we'll have to reduce our staff. To replace her will require more than just the same old games. We have always wondered where the intellectual efforts reside in the development and manufacturing of new game product. And to our dismay, we have found that the industry is very good at just doing more of the same. The large manufacturers have enjoyed both hardware and software margins that cannot be supported by future casino in-store sales, yet they continue to demand price points that protect these unrealistic margins. Now let me stop here and just say thank you to Aristocrat for the breakfast, but I think they're talking about those guys. These inflated slot prices and participation costs might fit if the new game product was really innovative and could drive new gamer visits. But unfortunately, all we get is the same old type of games. Our core slot customer looks different today than they did 10 years ago. In 2002, when you measure aggregate coin in, the average player in our casino was 53 years of age. In 2009, the average player was 64. In other words, over a period of 9 years, the average age of their players increased by 11 years. We can only speculate that in rough numbers, a current 50-year-old who was born in 1960 witnessed the personal computer boom in their 20s, which profoundly changed their expectations. These players have a different concept of electronic media and game technology. Older players still enjoy our games, but unfortunately, our older players are meeting the end-of-life expectancy very rapidly. As an operator, these trends are very concerning. We have no faith that today's game manufacturers will recognize this trend. We have no faith that game manufacturers can produce an entertainment slot product that will be priced to meet operator or customer expectations. The current slot manufacturers have assisted in almost ruining most operators through high-priced, low-concept games that most consumers are repulsed to play. I think that guy had an opinion. And I think that there's truth in what he says. I think that for all of us, though, we all got so caught up in serving pent-up demand that we all got in the business of making more of the same. We all got in the business of building bigger boxes that look just like the boxes before, with perhaps different carpet color and different lighting schemes. That the games that we present to our customers, the service that we present to them, really hasn't changed much in 30 years. And it worked for a long time, and that was great. But I'm not sure it's working everywhere anymore. Here in Oklahoma, you still have a pretty good set of pent-up demand, although the expansion of machines will certainly absorb that demand. If you go over to Macau, you see the effects of huge pent-up demand as casino after casino after casino gets built and revenues continue to climb. You go to places like Atlantic City, anywhere along the East Coast, Las Vegas, where the supply is caught up and we see that hard times are coming. And the fact is that human nature says we won't stop building until we're oversupplied. Just how it goes. Let's consider the numbers for a minute. 75% of all adults didn't gamble last year. That means only 1 adult in 4 even set foot in a casino and tried a slot machine or a table game. 80% of those that tried a game didn't come back for a second visit. That means that just 5% of adult consumers support our entire industry. 19 out of 20 don't like what we sell. That's the bad news, and that's also the opportunity. The average age of our regular players now is 64 years old. We can't go on like that. We can't have our average age of players continue to increase. We've got to find a way to reach out and grab the younger players. And when I say younger, I'm talking about 50 or 45. That's about the age when the kids are leaving home and people have the time and the discretionary revenue to gamble with. The internet has profoundly changed our lives. Even if you don't use the internet, it's changed your life. And it's bringing rapid crisis to us. I'm not talking about internet gambling yet. I'm just talking about the internet. It changes every consumer's expectation of what a value is. Internet makes comparison shopping easy. You can look up prices, you can buy applications or get free applications to put on your phones to take pictures of barcodes in Best Buy and find out if it's the best deal. You can comparison shop everywhere, and I'm guessing that most of us do. There's an incredibly wide selection on the internet, incredibly easy access. All you have to do is sit down and click with our phones and our iPads. You don't have to be at home to do it anymore. And then there's the allure of free. Everything is free or very low cost on the internet. And that's something that we don't know how to compete with. And the internet has over 1 billion daily users. Way, way more than what we have. Let's look at the importance of the internet for a minute before we start putting these pieces together. Let's look at the number 167. That's the Google valuation. If you take the share price yesterday times the number of shares, Google alone was worth $167 billion. Now that's a company that didn't even start into business until 1998, when gambling was well established. 70. That's the market cap of all private businesses in the gaming industry. That means everybody. That means slot manufacturers, casinos, hotel operators, the whole works. $70 billion for everybody combined. Google alone is worth 2.5 times what our industry valuation is. If you were to throw in Apple, Facebook, and a few others, the internet valuation rises to $1.5 trillion as compared to our $70 billion. If there's any doubt as to what the public prefers, look at these numbers. Market capitalization values are erratic and they change, but in rough terms, we can see the writing on the wall. Gaming stocks are worth far less now than they were 5 years ago. Internet stocks are worth far more. The guys on Wall Street that obviously don't always know what they're doing are looking and saying that they believe in the internet and they don't believe in us. And the numbers back them up. Google made right at $2 billion in after-tax profits last quarter. Apple made $5.99 billion last quarter. Our whole industry didn't make $2 billion last year. Our problems and why we're declining. Pricing. How many of you buy things? Only one person. It's amazing. 3 people now. And I got to believe that you all do, so I'll just pretend you all put up your hands. Is there anybody here that doesn't buy something? That doesn't buy anything? I don't see anybody saying that. So when you go out to buy something, how important is price? Do you consider price when you make a purchase? Is there anybody that doesn't consider price when they make a purchase? John, are you raising your hand? No? Okay. Now, imagine yourself as a first-time visitor to this casino hotel. And I'm not picking on this place. It looks like a great place. I've never been here before. But just imagine yourself. You've never gambled before, and you walk into the Hard Rock Casino in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you've got $200 in your pocket, and you're looking for a good time. You make $60,000 a year. So $200 is not trivial to you. You've got to get value for that money. Now you walk into this casino and you look over that ocean of bright lights and bill validators. What do? First time here, you've got no other information available to you. How do you estimate what it costs to gamble here? How do you figure that out? How do you figure out what would represent a good value? Would that value be getting at least 2 hours of time? That's $100 an hour. Probably if you're making that $50, $60, $75,000 a year, you're going to be looking for a whole evening's entertainment. But if you walk up to any machine here, you've got no clue as to what it's going to cost you to play. It might be a 1-cent denomination game, but it could take $6 to play it. It might be a 25-cent game, and the maximum you can wager is 75 cents. We've taken our denomination indicators and altered them so radically that they are no longer pricing guidelines. There is nothing in this casino, or any casino that I know of, that gives you a clue as to what it's going to cost. And so if I've got that $200 in my pocket, and I walk up to a machine, and I put in a $20 bill and I start playing, chances are very, very good that that money will be gone in 3 or 4 minutes. And I'm going to look at that machine, and I'm going to look at my wallet and think about pulling out another $20 bill and think, you know, $20 at 3 minutes, that's $400 an hour for entertainment. You know, 900 numbers are better deals than this. So I should go home and get back on the internet and enjoy myself there, because our pricing is crazy. Our lack of pricing indicators are crazy. We provide no clue because and this is what drives me crazy. I talk to people about this, go, well, all our players understand the pricing. True. All your players do. But the 95% of people that don't play have no understanding. And if we don't figure out a way to appeal to them, we don't have a future. So one of the things to ask yourselves about your own casino is, what do I need to charge on the average per hour to be able to welcome a player? In other words, could I charge a player $5 an hour and be happy to see him? Or do I need 10, or do I need 20? But we don't think about it like that. And until we do, we're not going to find the opportunities that are in front of us. We think, oh, here's our hold percentage. Here's our payback percentage. We pay back 93%. We can't afford to pay out more. Well, the payback percentage is only 1/3 of the equation, because the total cost to play, which is all that matters, is the payback percentage, or rather the hold percentage, times the average value of the wager times the number of wagers made per hour. So if we make faster games, they cost more. Slower games cost less. Higher denominations cost more, or not higher denominations, to say higher wagers per game, because as we talked about, the penny games can have bigger wagers than the dollar games sometimes. But we don't really think about what it costs per hour, and we say to ourselves, I cannot afford to lower my prices. Yet, if we walked out onto that casino floor right now, we would find that probably 80% of the machines are empty. And I'd submit that if you had a way to dynamically price, you could afford to have somebody sitting there losing $2 an hour, and you're ahead of the game. We have an inventory that is primarily underutilized, and we have no technology that allows us to take advantage of that. Trust. We are in one of the few industries where you have church groups and large minority portions of the population that want us to go away. And a larger portion of the population would want us to go away if it weren't for the subsidies they get on the taxes. If the money from lotteries and casinos weren't helping to pay the state's bills, we wouldn't be around. Nobody trusts us. Nobody. They don't know how our games work. Most people think that they're rigged. Most people think that gambling is evil. Most people like to do it anyway. That's our dilemma, though. How do we, if we are going to become not an outlying industry, but a true consumer industry, how do we go about increasing trust with our players? We have boring propositions. How many of you here play slot machines? How many of you here don't play slot machines? So more don't than do. And we're in the business. I remember I had a friend once that sold old slot machines for home use. And we followed some people home one day, and they set it up and went back to see them a couple weeks later, and nobody's playing it. And go, well, why? Well, it's no fun. If you're not gambling, the game itself is about as boring as it can be. Watching three little reels spin and come up with combinations that there's nothing at risk has no real entertainment value. We are locked into that basic proposition. A guy named Charlie Fay invented the slot machine in 1895. He used springs and levers and gears to make it. Today we have incredibly fast microprocessors with lots of memory and huge video screens with lots of pixels, and they're measured in megabits and gigabits and zigabits or whatever they want to call it. But we still use all of that technology to make a rendition of what Charlie Fay invented 115 years ago. That probably doesn't make a lot of sense. What are the chances? What are the chances that old Charlie, as smart as he was, came up with the best gaming proposition on earth back in 1895? I'd say they're about zero. But because it worked for so long, we haven't tried to get anywhere else. Now, I read you a letter from an operator that picked on manufacturers, and I spent my life as a supplier, as a manufacturer. And I can see the merit in what he had to say in his letter, but I also have some complaints as a supplier about how operators treat us. First of all, you put in a game and you give it about 6 weeks to perform. And if it doesn't win more than all the other games on the floor, it's out the door. And you want that as a free trial. And you want terms. And what that means is that the young guys that are starting out, the young women that are starting out, can't afford to create innovative content for you. They can't afford to get it in your door. They can't afford to prove it out because you won't give them a chance. And even as an established manufacturer, what drives me crazy is that for the most part, casino operators refuse to share their numbers with us. They won't tell us exactly how our game is doing. They want better games. They want higher performance, but they're not going to tell us how the ones we built are really performing. That's like shooting in the room in the dark and hoping you hit the target. And if somebody gets lucky and hits the target, you call it a good game. And it's not. But let's think about how operators analyze their games today. They use a metric called win per day. Everybody know what that is? It's how much money the machine has in it at the end of a 24-hour period. And what most people do is they'll take all the machines in the casino, add up all the money that they've made in one given day, and divide it by the number of machines and come up with an average. Let's say the average is $200 a day. Now, if a new game comes in and it earns $500, everybody's thrilled. That's a great game. If a new game comes in and earns $50, everybody's disappointed. That thing's a dog and it's got to go. But that's really not the story. Because games don't make you any money at all. Games collect the money from the players who pay it. So let's take that game that's earning $500 a day. What if we could go in there and look at the play and realize that what we're doing is we are shifting the revenue from all the other games on the casino floor to those few new ones, because the players that you have prefer to play the new ones, but they would have played the old ones. And if Peter comes in and he's spending on average of $60 every time he visits, and he's still spending $60, but he's moved 40 of it to the new game, have you made any new money? Now let's take that game that's only earning half of house average, and let's presume that even though it's only earning $100 a day instead of the $200 your house average is, that money comes from players that are spending more or that otherwise would not have come back. If I could prove to you, if I could show you that game earned its $100 from a pocket that you would not otherwise see, would you still throw it out? If I could prove to you that the game that's earning $500 a day did nothing but shift your existing revenue around, and the game that's only earning $100 a day brought you $100 worth of new revenue, which game would you keep? And the answer is clear. You got to go for the incremental revenue. But our tools and the way we look at the world don't take into account specific player behavior. They only look at gross machine behavior. Those were sins that we could cover up when the demand to gamble exceeded the supply of gambling machines. But now that that's not true, we got to change. You got to rethink how you measure performance. And when you do, you'll start to see brand new content come onto your floor. Maybe some of it will take a while to catch on. Maybe some of it will never catch on at all. But if you don't start getting new content to experiment with on your casino floors and giving that content a fair chance with some marketing support and some time, you're going to be stuck with the same old games that your dying player base likes to play, but nobody else does. The choice is yours. The choice is ours. And we can rightfully pick on the manufacturers for not coming up with new ideas, but if nobody buys them, it's pretty hard to pick on them too hard. Costs. Your costs are rising. Your taxes are rising. Prices of machines are rising. You know, I use the analogy that imagine it's 1980. In 1980, a slot machine cost $1,600 on average, and a personal computer cost right around $6,000. Now go forward 30 years to 2010, and that personal computer, a far, far better personal computer, costs $600. And a slot machine that plays pretty much like that old one did costs $16,000. One technology has gone up by a factor of 10, the other has dropped by a factor of 10. And I don't know of any slot manufacturer that is saying our prices will be cheaper next year. I don't know of any consumer electronic manufacturer that isn't saying that. Now, what's the answer? The answer is that the internet and the consumer electronic business is so large that they have economies of scale we can't dream about. And that means that we've got to change how our games are designed to use those devices, because we can't afford to pay ever higher prices. I use the analogy that if the consumer industry was run like the gaming industry, and if you wanted to run a program like Adobe Photoshop, you would have to buy an Adobe computer and an Adobe printer to run that program. And then if you wanted to run Microsoft Word, you would have to buy a Microsoft computer with a Microsoft printer. And for every application from every other company, you would have to buy a new device. And every time that manufacturer upgraded their device, none of their old content, none of their old programs would transfer forward. You'd have to throw it away and buy all new. That's just plain old inefficient. And we can look across the street to see how our consumer industry neighbors are doing things, and we can either choose to continue to be proprietary and secretive, or we can be open. If you look at the internet, which we've already demonstrated has had incredible growth, there's almost no secrecy there. You can find out how many visits each web page has instantly without paying a penny. You can't find that out about traffic or players in an individual casino. We protect information to the point where it hurts us. Let's look at some industries that have failed to adapt to the internet. We're talking about just the last 7 or 8 years. Bookstores. Borders went bankrupt in February of this year. The number of printed books being sold is rapidly diminishing. Those that are sold by Amazon. Most books are going to the ebook format. There's an industry that isn't coming back. Magazines. August 2nd, 2010. Newsweek magazine used to be one of the premier magazines in the world, sold for $1. $1. Because the ad revenues had diminished, the cost of producing had gone up, and they failed to reckon with what the internet brought. Where you can go on and see just about any newspaper there is, find out about any news you want, and have it personalized for you. Now, whether that's good or bad is immaterial right now. It killed this industry. recorded music. Music sales in the past decade were cut in half. That's because everybody steals it. Everybody downloads for free. Whether that's right or wrong is immaterial, it's still killing that industry. And that industry has some very archaic ideas of how to protect itself. They're saying, here's how we did it, here's how we're going to do it forever, and you, world, are going to have to change. And the world's going, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do what we want. What about gaming? If we continue to conduct business the way we do, if we don't adapt to these changes, we're the horse race tracks of the future. There's hardly a racetrack right now in this country that is profitable. 30 years ago, there were a lot of them. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, this was one of the primary spectator sports in the country. Now it's almost dead, and except for a few events like the Kentucky Derby and Churchill Downs, it'll be dead soon. This is exactly where we're headed if we don't change. We cannot say, gee, we've got this great industry, it's been working for 30 years, it's going to work forever in the future, because we just looked at a few examples of how technology has killed businesses that were thriving just 10 years ago. We are not immune. Then what happens when internet gaming is legalized? Talk about a low-cost provider. These guys can run paybacks of 99% because the cost to download a game to a home computer is almost nothing. They might even be able to run 99.5%. How can we compete with that? If we think that our product is just spinning reels, if we think that our product is only about payouts, we've lost our competitive edge. We will get clobbered when internet gaming happens. And it's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when. As soon as the federal government and the state governments figure out how to tax the revenue and share it, it'll be here. And we'll be in trouble. So that's the bad news. Is there opportunity for improvement? Are there things that we can do? And I believe that our best days are ahead. I believe that we have huge opportunity to do better, to make this business 5-10 times the size that it is now. But it'll be a very different business. We've got to learn to emphasize emotional gratification. Players don't play to win money. That's the biggest myth we've got to get over. Because we are in this business to earn a profit, we think the players are here to make money. But just about every person that walks into that door that is sane walks in with a budget. I've got $50, I got $100 to spend tonight, and when it's gone, I'm going home. That says they know they're losing. Can they get a good game out of it? Can they have fun? Can they get that emotional gratification? It is not about how long they play only, although there has to be a certain duration. It is about what kind of a roller coaster ride you take your players on. Do they feel important? Are they recognized? Do they have special experiences? Do they have unexpected experiences? Are they up for a while and down for a while? When I first started working in casinos back in '72, I worked at a little place on the Las Vegas Strip called Mr. Si's Casino. My boss, we had like 300 machines, and what my boss would do, his name was Norm Little, he would walk around in the evenings and watch players play, and when he saw somebody that was just about to lose all their money, and he somehow felt that they were going to give up, he'd walk over to that person, take out his slot key, because back then, I was 18 then, I had my own key to the slot machines and my own drop key. Things were different then. But he would open up the door on the slot machine, and he would flip the coin switch, because you could do that then, and put in 3 coins, pull the handle, hold the reels, so it would come up into a winning outcome. And if it was an average player, he'd give him a bar jackpot, which was $10. In the middle, he'd give him a triple bar jackpot, which was $50. And if he really liked him, he'd give him 3 sevens, which was $100 at that time. And then he would very quickly close the door, and the money would start pouring out of that game, and he'd say, "Thank you for being here." And the player would always look at him in amazement and go, what just happened here? What's going on? And that was just, thank you for being there. Now, Norman knew that some small percentage of the people he did that for would take those silver dollars or those quarters and stuff them in their pocket and head for the door as soon as he wasn't looking. But he also knew that the majority of those people would take that money and play it back, lose it all, reach into their pocket, take out more money, and play some more. That he'd primed the pump, he'd developed trust, he'd given them a feeling of being special, he'd given them an extended ride. And the irony is that in our casinos right now, we have all of these independent machines that are sitting there. They don't know anything about the player. But on top of them, we put these player tracking systems that you pay dearly for that collect personal information about each player and what they do. But we never use that personal information to modify the game outcome. And that's crazy. We can actually cause the math model of a machine to change according to who the player is. You guys that are casino managers and technicians, you know that you buy a lot of machines based upon volatility. Which machines are high volatility, which machines are low volatility, and you strive to have a mix for all your players out there. The question is, how does a player figure out which is which? How do they find them? We say, oh, they just figure it out. Some do, but most don't. But what if instead of you're having to buy machines based upon volatility, what if as soon as a player inserted their card, we changed the math model to match their personality? It's all doable. And contrary to what most of you are thinking, it's all completely legal. We've gotten such things approved already. As long as the difference in payments are paid back as bonuses, what we do is we cut the base payback percentage of the game to statutory minimum, and then we pay the rest out as bonuses, and those bonuses are timed according to the psychographic profile of the player. So if this player likes to have small jackpots frequently, and we see that the random number generator is not treating them well right now, we can throw them bonus money. But instead of having bonuses coming up on a little display at the top saying, hey, you just won $10, or a big display that you pay a couple $1,000s for, we don't need to go through that. Instead, we just tell the machine, hey, look, machine, if your random number generator came up with a loss, stop at bar, 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 and pay this guy $10. Now, the math all works out the same. We've already got all the meters built into the games. We can do this right now. Well, except manufacturers don't have it in their protocol. But we can modify the ride that our players go on by the individual player. And on top of that, we can watch a guy or a lady play on her first machine and see that she's losing. I think the average time on machine for most players is 8 or 9 minutes before they move on to the next machine. And we can take that knowledge to the next machine and the next machine and the next machine so that we can deliver not just a personalized experience for that one gaming machine, but a personalized experience for their entire visit. If they're losing and losing and losing, we can bring them a win later. All these things are possible technically. All these things have some issues to get resolved. All of these things are going to be essential to your future. And we got to start figuring out how to get them on the floor. We got to rethink pricing, as we said before. And these tools I just talked about will help you do that. If you know that someone has a $50 budget because your player tracking record shows that they're spending that approximately week after week, let's make sure that we give them value for their money. Let's make sure that we give them enough time. And indeed, if someone is falling behind on their time and we know what their psychographic profile is, just like Norm Little, my boss, did 30 years ago, I guess 40 years ago now, we can throw them money out of marketing and we know it's going to come back. We toss away marketing money like crazy on ads that don't work in newspapers and magazines. And we can take that marketing money and use it as incentives to extend a player's experience. But we've got to figure out what each player can afford, and we've got to adjust our pricing to match. This is really nothing different than the internet is doing right now. When you go to certain sites, depending on how you got there, you might see a different price on the same product. Everything on the internet is already personalized. Why aren't we learning that lesson? course, that's what we're talking about in deep personalization, is that every gaming experience should not be the same for every player on a given machine. It should change according to what that player's circumstances and desires are. Again, we have that information. We just don't use it. And of course, we have to adapt to standard technologies. There is no reason why we need to be building proprietary game screens and proprietary cabinets. All of our customers, all consumers, are getting used to what they have at home. There's no reason that we can't have all of our game outcomes conducted in a server. It's like Class 2 plus, and just have those outcomes shipped to display devices, and then gather the players' wagering choices from the touch screen or button panel that's attached to it, and go play there. We put in, we got about 500 iPad games out right now in California, and we got a long ways to go. But the great thing about it is an iPad costs this year $499. That's a lot cheaper than a $17,000 gaming machine. And we've got to start the hard work of reaching out to people that don't currently play. That's 95% of the population. And we've got to figure out marketing campaigns not to just appeal to the players of the casino down the street, but how to attract people that don't currently gamble to come in and visit you. And that means that there has to be pricing that they can afford. There has to be a level of trust they've never had before. And there has to be a level of variety that we simply don't offer right now. Let's go back to the trust issue to end this up, because there's a saying I learned a long time ago from a guy named Benny Binion that has served me well in everything I've done. And I think it's important that we realize what our true mission is. And that is, people hate to be fooled, but love a chance to fool themselves. That defines our business. If we bring a player in and we say, sit down here and play it, you'll win $1 million, and then they do that and they don't, we've lied to them and they hate us. But if we say, sit down here and play, you might win $1 million, they can make that choice for themselves. They can suspend their normal disbelief and they can engage in that fantasy. The same fantasy they engage in when they buy a lottery ticket. The same fantasy they engage in when they go to a movie and watch a chase sequence that could never happen in real life. We are in the business of providing fantasy fulfillment to consumers. That fantasy is sometimes about winning large amounts of money. That fantasy is sometimes about feeling important and being recognized and welcomed by name. The fantasy goes on and on and on, but it's always about being special. And if we realize that and we readjust our promotions and our games and our methods to provide those feelings of specialness, to give players a chance to fool themselves, if you will, in a way that they know that they're engaging in and they're willing to pay for, we can do very well. Okay? Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.